Yeah, but the inheritance in the African American culture, though, show it's you inherited the status of your mom by law. So whatever the status of your mother was, so that way, and they would have to enforce slavery. Right. So if you look at the laws that were established at the time, you inherited the status of your mother. So that way there was no way to get out of slavery. It kept the system going. And so that's those two distinctions. I had never thought about it the way you just said it. Hey, in your culture, you inherit of your grandfather. Right. But in our culture, you inherit the status that you bring from your mother. And that was by law within America. So that way they could keep slavery going, because what had ended up happening is that under the Catholic faith is that a slave could become a free person. Right. And so you had people who were born slaves who were being freed, or they would marry out of that. And that the powers that be were like, no. If we keep this going, I mean, we're not going to have our wealth that's established in that. And and so knowing that culturally, right, knowing that that's what's going on, it helps me deal with what's in the present. And I never heard anyone describe understanding the significance of the African culture the way you just did, in terms of this amalgamation, if you will, in America, and how this blend and what we represent to others, right? Others being worldwide. I mean, that is wonderful. And I love the way you said, hey, the further we go back, the closer we get to being an African, right? And that was just a wonderful description of that, and really puts a lot of things in focus for me.
And you continued the thought that you were about to say something. So.
No. I when we go into this part of, I could talk forever, because again, I'm fascinated by African American culture. I mean, it's something that but what I've realized now is that the portions, that same spirit exists in other parts of the world as well. That there are people who have gone through maybe not the same, but kind of a similar kind of struggle wherever they come from. And they might have been oppressed and basically, again, just suffered. And so when I see a Nigerian or an African who's just immigrated here 2 years, a year, going through the sort of things I did when I first arrived in New York, unfortunately, I came from, I would say, I was fortunate to come from middle class, or maybe even upper middle class African family. And I use that, I say that because I learned how to speak English before I left. But maybe these individuals are struggling with English, but all they can hear across is this bickering between Democrats and Republicans, Black, white, Hispanic. There are these small groups, right, that are just completely ignored. And they're the glue in what this tapestry is. They're the ones that kind of, and so that's what I want to express in talking about Dream Week specifically, is that the African-American genius itself is what we can use as a model to create a more peaceful, more creative, more forward-looking. That song, We Shall Overcome, for me, is something that should be the global national anthem. So we shouldn't be having the idea of Palestine and Gaza. We say, look, you know what? There are people who went through a lot of this kind of conflict things. You look back at how they sorted it out and united themselves. These are people that came from different tribes. They couldn't speak the language. They came from Africa. Just the idea of being on on this ship that, for people who had never seen ocean, never seen that vast amount of water, being in the hood, being there for months, you come out of that experience and being with people that don't even speak your language. And in the filth, all that, you come out on the other end completely traumatized. So what the people that landed here in Africa and gone through that middle passage were broken. If they weren't broken by slavery, they were broken by that journey. They're finished.
Yes.
They're done. So what you had was just a shell that you could do anything you liked with. I don't want to use the word zombie, but they had to have gone so inward. The ones that survived had to be so in their heads, because that's all they had to do to survive. Everything else was just like weird. And then they arrive at the place that is so strange that, and I don't want to belittle the additional suffering that happened, but it must have been some sort of relief to just be on firm ground again, just to like start to hope. So we shall overcome is that traumatic experience, that being taken away. We talk about reparations here when we say, look, these people are slaves. Do you know? And that's one of those magical thinking that we have sometimes as Black people, that the slaves didn't they have brothers and sisters? Didn't they have children? Didn't they have parents? Do you know how it is to live in a small expand, because it all happened mostly on the coast of West Africa, mostly. But just to have for 400 years, individuals taken out of your environment. Do you know this kind of suffering that will bring, and the kind of intimidation that brings about the way you view life? You can't go into the bush. We used to have all these myths. You can't go into the bush. You'll see this spirit, you'll see this. But it was really just slavery that caused all of that. Is people just simply disappeared. So the impact, to have maybe one's grandfather taken, one's uncle taken, one's brother or cousin taken, and then one's child taken, that individual in Africa is also broken completely. This is so we can't separate, like Tiffany mentioned, we can separate and talk about who suffered more. These things are just very abstract and not even necessary at all. It was just an awful thing. The question is, it happened. So what has come out of that? And history is not just 400 years old. We don't know what this, and maybe 1,000 years, people are talking about that incident and going, yeah, that was when God Almighty took a whole bunch of Africans and took them to America and crafted it. You can create a new narrative that has an incredible end to it. And that is one of the things we want to push into. We can say this spirit here is something that can be beneficial to all of the globe. How we can talk about with full confidence, without even seeing it, like MLK mentioned, that we can bring about change, even though we don't know if it's going to happen in our own lifetime.
We can start the seeds of it is exactly to your point. It's what do you want it to be? Because we're at a stage where we can decide how we want to be treated and talked about. We can paint the narrative ourselves because we know what the history is. So if we put the history out there, whether somebody else wants to put it out or not, doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's true. I have a question.
We have to be very clear that it's a beautiful, 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 I wouldn't say beautiful history, but the end is certainly going to be wonderful because of how it's just transpired. There's always something to celebrate. The amount of beauty that has come from that culture is just amazing. Now, nobody wants to suggest that you go and do those things so that this can come out of it. And I think that's maybe a biblical passage.
Yeah.
But it's happened. And for me, I feel
come out of this.
Yeah. Hey, Reggie, you had a question you're going to ask?
Yeah, well, this is kind of off the subject. I know because it's funny how, like Africans, want to, be more associated with the African Americans, and African Americans want to be more associated with Africans. The question I have is, how prevalent or how widespread the diseases that we have over here as African Americans, as far as kidney disease, high blood pressure, cholesterol, how prevalent widespread it is in Africa? Is it the same as here, or is less, for as kidney disease and the stuff that we have as African Americans over here?
Yeah, there's a kind of a joke that goes around, in Nigeria, Lagos especially. It says that if the white man hasn't seen it, it doesn't exist. Right? Because we believe that everything we know obviously is, it's kind of Western culture. It's, it's all in books and everything, but there are things that have happened and they're, just concepts and ideas that are not in the language yet, but Africans know intuitively and in their own language. None of these things have been translated. So the way Africans will view disease is very different. My grandfather and parents would have, there might have been evil spirits, or you did this, or you did that. But to start off with, the people who have the most wealth that I have met in Texas live exactly or almost exactly the same way that villagers in Africa live in. Right? They live off the land primarily. The food, it's just like three miles away in the farm. The trade, everything is fresh. There was no refrigeration in these villages. So they cook every day. There's always, and it's done outside with wood and, pots made of clay. It's just very fascinating how you start to buy a high-end open range, and then the description is all about trying to cook as if it's outside, right? Everything is grilled. So then it became fascinating and popular to, we have milk and it comes in a can, and we have this, it comes in a can, and fish, sardines come in a can, and people start to glorify sardines that people ridicule in the West, or corned beef or spam or whatever it's called, and avoid. So the middle class folks start to eat those kind of things and avoid just going to the market and having freshly butchered meat. Yeah. So a lot of what we eat, we're talking about a culture where thousands of years you've had this sort of diet. You've had to go walk at least 5 miles a day in any direction. People walk. People are walking here as exercise. You walk because nobody exercised. My father used to jog, and the villagers would look at him and be thinking, this guy's out of his mind. What are you running to? So that will be how that will be observed. What you need to run. The people carrying baskets for miles in their head, that's their work. Nobody tried to lose weight. Lose weight was like it's something for you to lose weight. It's ridiculous. So I'm not trying to belittle your question, but
no.
A lot of what we can't separate lifestyle from diet and health. It's all
always
related.
Comes back to that. Yes. I mean, any question when it comes to disease, it always comes to the diet. I don't care how you put it, it's going to always come back to that circle, to the diet, which you eat. So
when you eat that, and then you get in a Bentley, and then drive everywhere, and you say, I've been around, or get on a plane and everything, it just compounds itself. It compounds itself. Right. And then we also get further away from the earth. So you don't even know what a real potato looks like. You might look at one that is being, played around with, and it's a perfect apple or whatever it is. But people who know apples can look and go to a regular grocery store and go, it's not the kind of apple you want to be eating.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So this is. And then to come from what it said is the son of the soil or the child of the soil, to actually, so anytime we had an event in a birthday or graduation or whatever it is, we would slaughter the meat the morning of the event. right? And the women would take off all the stuff in the stomach and all the poop and stuff and knead all that. And you call it chitlins in here, but we had all of that for breakfast. That was the first fruit from that animal. And then the stuff that is barbecued in the evening, to taste that is something that everyone should have. So once you taste that kind of fresh meat, I mean, it doesn't, so it would be like compared to a real high-end restaurant here who probably have had the meat for a few days. Right. It would be compared to that kind of steak. But right. And then eat the whole thing. So when you talk about that, but they're eating that, but we are literally not eating all day in anticipation of that meal. We're not having
the chemicals and the fillers and all that kind of stuff.
Sugar cereal and put sausages and everything, then have that big meal afterwards,
Right.
Yeah. And then we're also working throughout the day. Right. Everyone is involved in that, making that meal. So I think that's again, Tiffany and Kevin are the knowledgeable folks here when it comes to all this sort of diseases as well. But I just suspect that my sister lives in San Antonio. She has never been to a hospital except to have she had a children. Never. My grandmother could smell sugar in a cup of coffee if you handed it to her. She could smell it.
Wow.
She never had sugar. So that's the kind of stuff.
Yeah, and what you see on the scientific side of that show is that where you see there's an adoption of the quote unquote Western diet, there's also a following of diseases. And the Western diet part is the couple things, right? It's the consistent eating. And then it's also those foods high in processed and simple glucose meals, right? So like processed breads, candies and those things, and it's those things plus the consistent eating of them over time, right? We have our chief medical advisor, Dr. Weston, always says when he talked to his grandfather. So Dr. Weston's fairly old, and so his grandfather's has passed away quite some time ago. Would always say, "Hey, why would you eat a hog every day? Because you have to kill that." Right. And I don't know if you guys, I grew up in a small West Texas town, and I've been involved in the slaughtering of a hog or a goat. That's some work. Right. And so you slaughter that one hog or that two hogs or that one calf, and you have enough meat to share and swap and trade with everybody in the neighborhood. But it just required so much work. And so Dr. Weston said, his granddad would say, why do all that when I can make beans and eat vegetables, still be full, and I don't have to do all that work? So I always say Black people were vegans. We just didn't have a name for it at the time. And as most Americans were at the time as well.
But you also appreciate the shock of that diet when, the captured slaves arrived on the shores. Again, there's so much. I know there are many books I've been reading, but I just thought about these things when I arrived here, and I started to really, really think about the kind of experiences they might have gone through. Because we will think about, the back-breaking work and the whips and the raping and, maiming of the slaves. But with something about just arriving at the place, and then all the food is strange.
Everything.
And you have to eat it to survive. Yeah. Right? So that's shock into the system of not just as an individual, but as as a group. We don't know what the impact of that. I don't know if you have, I believe that there are going to be studies made of this experience maybe years when we have a lot more stuff, but we don't know what that impact is, because we've never had a massive group like that have been taken and just being it's almost like a insane experiment, really. Let's just take this bunch of people in there and just work on them and see how it comes out. Right. And it turns out that, somehow or the other, because of their resilience and the ones who survived, it turns out that they became this practically superhuman beings.
Yeah. Yeah. So anything else you guys to do to wrap up, or any additional questions for show, Tiffany?
Well, I think we need to hear a little bit of Reginald, you've had a completely different, unique experience from most other African Americans. You're, someone who is a celeb, and you had an opportunity to travel and meet a lot of other African Americans and be afforded the opportunity to be in spaces that the average person wouldn't be in. So you have a completely unique perspective of what the African American culture is and what it has to offer to the world. I mean, how would you state that? I want to understand how different you feel your life might have been if you didn't have your own unique experiences that you did and the fortune of success.
To me, it's almost like, man, I've been in the public eye ever since I was like in the third grade, man. As far as athletics and entertainment. And, when I travel across the country, man, it's funny because you do see totally different attitudes amongst African Americans, man. I've been, maybe 20 other countries, but over here, it's like, when I go to Texas, they are more passive. Texas, it's like they lay back and they accept almost anything that is told to them to do. They'll just accept it. And I remember when I first came to California, man, and if you don't like fight over here, man, it's like you're gonna get ran over. So I remember one time, man, I was over here for a few years, and I went back to Texas, and I went to get some gas, and I put $10, I think, gas in the tank, and the man said that'd be $10. I already paid the man the money, and I was like, he was a white man. He said that'd be $10. I said, man, I already paid you, man. And the mentality from California to Texas, if I was still living in Texas, I would have been like, oh, sir, I already paid your money. But to me, over here, if you act like that, you'll get ran over. And I took that mentality back home, and you don't talk like that back home because like my mother and all them, they're always like passive, they accept a lot of things, and when I go to the South, same way. Mississippi even worse, so it's like, it's funny how we all African Americans, but the region that we live in is totally different. New York, a little bit more harder. LA is hard, and Chicago, the bigger cities, African Americans is, we a lot more hardened than those are in the South. Yeah. And I don't understand that.
Oh, I can tell you that there's a book called The 9 Nations of America. I think it's in The 9 Nations of America, Tiffany. I showed you the copy, and it's about how the different regions were formed, right, by different Europeans, right? And then there are different expectations on different people, right? The expectations of black people are here in Texas, like especially where we're at, is that you simply accept, like you said, Reggie, you accept that. You accept whatever's given, right? And that's not only from black people themselves, it's oftentimes from your interactions with non-blacks. Right. So one of the things that when I was in the corporate world, there was this expectation that I should be deferential to everyone. Now, they would never say it like that, right? They would say, oh, I never said that. But anytime I verbalized or disagreed with someone, it was always, what's wrong with Kevin? Right. So like in the Malcolm book or in Malcolm's autobiography, when you stop letting it roll off and you start speaking up, then it's like, hey, what's wrong with you? Because there's this expectation in the culture that that's how you're supposed to be deferential. Yeah. I remember I got into there was a more senior person than me, and I really respected how this person moved in the environment, right? And so I had a disagreement. And so I'm highly aware of this, right? That there's this expectation. And so I called several people, tried to get the wording around. I spent way too much time on this, to be honest with you. And this is more cultural things. And I got everything from just right. And I presented it. And it was because I disagreed. Right. I disagreed with this individual. So what's wrong with me? That somehow the word was disrespectful in the email. I wrote an email and it was just 5 words. Hey, no, we're not going to do this at this time. This person is going to be training with us. That's simple. That was seen as disrespectful. And after that time, from then on, I said, oh, I wasted way too much thought on this. So it didn't matter what I said or didn't say, right? It was going to be perceived as disrespectful. And so I just said, you know what? I've been here longer than this person. I know more than this person. And I'm just going to act as they act, right? Because then I just said, no, we're not doing that. And then it was that Malcolm moment where, what's wrong with Kevin? Right? Why is he so aggressive? Why is he so this? And so so to answer your question, there is an expectation here in Texas and the South that if you are a Black person, you're supposed to respond to people in a certain manner. Right? So like in my interactions with Tiffany, right? So Tiffany has a bigger personality than I do, and people like her more than me. I just accept that. That's the way that it is, right? And so, right? And so, but there's this expectation that somehow I'm supposed to be putting Tiffany in check. Cause that, I'm like, nah, that's not how we work, right? We're rolling because if you're asking me how to interact with people, I'm not the person to come to, right? Because I'm going to blow up a relationship, right? So Tiffany will navigate that. But if you need something structured and getting it done, you're going to come to me, right? If you need to get Tiffany someplace, you're going to come to me. But there is this expectation in the culture, not just Black culture, but in the culture in general, that there are these expected responses that you're supposed to have. And oftentimes those responses hinder on what happened in the past. Like, I'm a big believer in coalition building, right? I'm a big believer that we have no permanent allies. We only have permanent interests. And the thing that all four of us have in common is that we're Black, and you'll be treated as such in the public. Right. One of my fears or concerns in the back of my mind is we have our two daughters. They don't look Black by most standards. Right. But I have two nephews that are gorgeous. They're beautiful, handsome kids. Right. They're going to be the ladies are going to love them when they get older. Right. But my concern is that they get in the neighborhoods where they live. Right. Because they live in affluent neighborhoods. Right. Is that, that they're going to be reminded that they're Black. And my heart breaks because I remember what that was like. So to be reminded that you're Black, right? And that's a concern of mine. I think that's when you say Black culture and everything, that's the one common thread that we all have, is that no matter what your achievement is, no matter how much wealth or whatever you achieve in this world, we have that common thread of you're going to be treated Black. Right. So you're going to be treated, as you said, as a Negro. Right. And what is great about the culture that we're in is that most of us, we just say that's just part of it. We bounce off of it and we're going to push through on that part there. Sorry about that rant, but we're probably out of time.
The James Brown song, I'm Black and Proud. Yeah. Right. Yes. And I mean, the beat itself is, and funk to me is just seriously African. If you listen to Afro beats now, and people go, "Oh, wow, that sounds very African American," but it's young African kids not having to deal with producers, necessarily do the record industry, and just basically shortcutting that and producing stuff. And a lot of James Brown and all of that to African kids just sounded very African, just very sophisticated instruments. But that phrase, "I'm Black and Proud," was shocking when I first heard it. It's like, why do I have to be proud? I mean, it was like a nonsense statement.
Right.
I'm Black and proud, right? Because we don't have that reference. It wasn't against anything. Everyone is Black around me,
right.
Yeah. And then
that's good, right?
It makes sense.
I never heard that one. I never heard that.
It makes sense here.
Like, why you gotta be proud? It's like I was Black all around me.
I love it.
That one, man. That's a good one. I can make a good joke out of that one. Man, Black all around me.
Hey, I just want to let you know that I did my ancestry DNA, and I am 35% Nigerian, according to the report.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
We claim you now.
I told Tiffany.
I think I might be Mandinka.
I think Reginald definitely Nigerian, definitely Ghanaian.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
And those are going to come out quite a bit.
Yeah, I tell you, that whole DNA thing was great. I've been telling Tiffany, hey, Tiffany, I'm 8713.
Tiffany, have you done yours?
No.
My question, Kevin,
is Irish.
How many percent European were you?
13%, my friend. Yeah, that 13. Was a shocker to me. 13. Yeah. I went down, I did the numbers, and I was like, what? Oh my God. I was like, the guy from not Know Your Heritage, Lewis Gates. I was like, he's right. Oh my God. And so what's interesting is that when you go back and you're looking at these different people and you find that one person who looks quote unquote white is European, but they have no African ancestry, I was like, colonizer. I say that as a joke, right? Most people get serious about it, but that's the joke right now between me and Tiffany. I say, I'm 8713. Let's get yours done, right? Are you more adjacent than whatever? Because Tiffany is from Louisiana. Her family's from Louisiana, and her great grandmother, her grandmother, you looked at her, you would not see, most people don't see a black woman. They'll see someone who's from Miami, or they'll see that's what they see. When she went to Miami, Mud just had she was not loving Miami because everyone came up to her speaking Spanish, right? And she's like, I don't speak Spanish. And she would just keep going. She just wasn't getting that, hey, they don't see her as black. They see her as Cuban or Dominican, that type of thing, right? But her identity is built in black, right? And so the thing I always teach Tiffany about is that Tiffany's great grandfather on Muz's side, he died in World War I, right? And his body stayed there in the morgue for about a week. And it just so happened that one of the people in the church just happened to come across the guy at the morgue, and they were talking. He said, yeah, I got this white guy's body in there that nobody's claimed. He was like, well, what's his name? And he said, Marshall. And he says, no, that's Miss Eunice's husband. And so he had died in the war, right? Had been involved, had served in the segregated army, and his body came over, and no one identified his body. It stayed there for that long, right. And so that was an interesting story. So
definitely, I think ultimately, I got myself into some sort of trouble a few years back. I don't know if you remember, Tiffany, when what's her name now? She
said something.
Dolezal, Rachel Dolezal was going to come over here and to speak, and a group of they had a whole petition against me, and a whole group of African American women I know here sat. I met with them, and they were literally in tears and saying, "How could I do this to them? How could I even allow her to come?" And I don't know if we're there yet, but hopefully we'll get to a place where we'll allow Rachel Dolezal to sit in front of a bunch of African Americans and explain why she thinks she's black, and allow that kind of conversation to happen. Because you take her out and put her in anywhere, at least where I grew up, no one is going to even ask her that question. It won't be a question. It's not a question. She's not black, but she could be married to an Igbo man or Yoruba man and accepted in the tribe. Really? As married to an Igbo person. And she's now Igbo, but she's not going to ever be black, ever. Yeah. Wow. Right? So my question was, what is it in the African-American culture that allows everyone? She was the head of the NAACP in Spokane. And went to Howard on a scholarship. How does that happen?
Well, that happens because
dismissal of that and saying, hey, she's just a liar and deceitful and all of that. It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, we're generally more egalitarian in our beliefs and practices. As African Americans, we are. We're generally more egalitarian. There's several things you could go. You could say black people are just desperate to be accepted.
Question to an African or to a West African, be like, why do African Americans get to choose what black is?
Well, so is that a serious question? So it's a serious question, right? Because it's the definition of black, right? So anytime black people are successful, right? Then people want to pull away from being black. They want to downplay that blackness. One of the questions that drove me crazy that was when Barack Obama was running for president, and they asked him, did he consider himself black? Right? Of course he considers himself black. They consider him black. But for him to, if he was to say, no, I don't, here we have a person who's black, who's engaged in the black experience. Now that he is successful, he's denying blackness. So the very thing that they group us in, right, and tell us that we as a group can be successful, right? But if you have any individual success, then you're the exception and not the norm.
Right.
Well,
right. And so that's the frustrating thing for me. But go ahead, Tiff.
It's not that Obama was denying blackness. He was being asked to.
Asked to deny.
Over again, we are being asked to. As soon as you achieve success, you are an anomaly. You're not like the rest of them. The rest of them are like this. No, I can tell you, I grew up 7 streets over from the project. There were 100 Tiffany's. There were 100 Tiffany's in that little area. I am more like everybody that came from where I came from. I am just a more polished version of that. And to try to take away the achievements as soon as somebody achieves and say, well, that's because you've been in this environment and now all the whiteness has rubbed off on you. And that's why you have this success. No, we should be proud. I'm proud to be a black woman, and I'm successful because of everything I learned and am from where I came from. I wouldn't be me and all of this great personality that everybody loves. It came from 1420 Fairway Street. It came from that black environment that I was in until I was off to Europe.
Yeah, so I would say it's not us having the right to define what is black, right? But it is the common experience that everyone who looks like us experience. And when someone is successful who looks like us, we want them to acknowledge that blackness, right? And not pull away from it.
Rachel Dolezal and Cole don't look like us.
Yeah.
But they accept it. I'm saying that at least any person, even that could pass white, that says they're black, is accepted in the black culture.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It's that kind of very open book.
Yeah, it's black. That why would you want to be black? Why would you want to be black knowing what we go through?
Why would you admit to being black if you didn't have to? That's the sense I get of that.
Yeah, it is. And if you look at the founders if you look at a period of time that fascinates me is the time from 1865 up until about 1898, right? And that you had these black people, right? America created a total group of another race of people, right? These people who look white, but they have black ancestry, right? And so in order to continue to enslave the image of black people. And so you had these people, for all intents and purposes, looked white. Right. Mm-hmm. But yet they accepted their blackness. Right now, many centuries later, right, many generations later, right, a lot of their children said, no, we're just going to go on with the white thing. This whole black thing may weigh us down some. Right. More or less what they said. But when you look at the founders of Howard, all those gentlemen, they didn't look black, but they claim blackness. Right. One of my favorite people.
Proud of their blackness.
Yeah.
They were proud of the black blood that ran through their veins.
Yeah. One of my favorite people is T. Thomas Fortune, right? I don't know if you saw the movie about T. Thomas Fortune. I got into a troll beef with some of the people over there. But the reason I got into a back and forth with them was that it's important to portray the color of his skin correctly. Because he's a gentleman associated with the term Afro-American. Because he was very proud of being of African ancestry, right? And because they didn't know, when the average person saw him, they didn't know he was not black, right? But yet they treated him differently, and he was very proud of being black. And he wanted other people to know that just because you're of black ancestry, that means nothing. you can still have success and achievement. And so my beef with them is that they portrayed him more as a brown-skinned man who looks like me. But they missed the point from my viewpoint, is that he wasn't a brown-skinned man that looked like me, but he was still of the same heritage that I was. He was very proud of it. And he wanted others who didn't look like him to be proud of that African heritage. So it goes back to what you said, right? The further back we go, the more African we become, right? And we want people to be proud of that African heritage, and that we still have success, right? And so that's the part. So when you claim that, the Africanness of it, right? I always tell, I have a couple of friends, I say, we are the protectors of Africanness, right? We're telling people that it's okay to be from the continent of Africa, whatever the tribe that you're in, right? It's okay. And it's actually a good thing. But anyway, I'm on a rant. You got me going.
You guys are the actual Africans. We come from tribes, but you are so mixed that you're actually African. In fact, even more than that, you're kind of global. Like you mentioned, an amalgamation, or just a blend, really. But in terms of West Africans, you're a mix of all of those. But the question is that, say to a typical African, Obama is Kenyan with an American mother, white mother. That's how the description would be. That's how Obama is. It's not because he lived in America all his life doesn't count. He's Kenyan and has a white American mother. That's how it'll be described. Kamala will be described exactly like that. West Indian father and Indian mother. And
let me tell you how she's going to be treated.
In America. That's the word they will use.
Yeah.
And grew up in America.
But let me tell you how she's described, though, how her experience is that of a Negro. Well, in your words, right? Her experience is that of a Negro. The same thing with Obama.
That's the question I'm asking. Who gets to define who these individuals are? Because
I would say the dominant culture defines
the world, but don't see them like that at all.
Yeah. So it's going to be, from my viewpoint, the dominant culture is going to be determining who that person, because how they're going to treat them and interact with them. Right. So they're going to interact with Kamala Harris as if she's a black woman, because like right now, right, whether you disagree or agree with her politics, some of the reasons that people disagree with her, they're completely asinine, right? Have nothing to do with her policy. Right. It's more to do with her racial or ethnic claims. Right. Like there are black people who get upset about the fact that she prosecuted black people who committed crimes. Right. So and you can debate whether or not she was fair in terms of the sentencing. Right. But it's totally based in this idea, from my view, that's extremely racist against her, right? Well, she's not black enough, or we've all been in that position, right? So who gets to determine that? I think it's a definition from the dominant culture, right? So that's my view. And I don't know what Reg or Tiff's view of it are, but that's my view of it, is that they are the determinants of that,
so
right?
I keep coming back to the same thing. They don't have to be the determinants. We can decide today they're not the determinants of how we, of what the narrative is, and we can start pushing our own narrative about who we are and what we are.
One thing I know for sure, that nobody can dispute this, what I'm going to tell you. I'm darker than all y'all up there.
I knew it.
So you're 90-10, right? You're 90-10.
That's right.
You have to use this as a joke, because I honestly, I was described as a light-skinned guy.
Yeah, you are. You're a light-skinned brother, right? You are.
I'm not.
You are.
I'm not. I'm really not at all.
Yeah, but my family always asks me, why do I stay out of the sun? How do I lighten up so much? I'm like, what?
I was considered some light-skinned, and that's very, very, very interesting. And I never saw myself like that at all. But
hey, guys, we need to.
The average African has just 4 groups, so you know. The person that you meet on the street is white, black, Indian, Chinese. That's it.
Yeah.
You have to fall under one of those, right? And so Tiffany is leaning a little bit towards Indian.
You better stop, bro, if you want her to be nice.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
I see you don't want to be invited back. I see you
They don't have those. They don't have those. Well, South American. I'm from South America and all of that. You don't have those kind of distinctions at all. It's just those four groups. It's Chinese, Indian, Black, or white.
And you've been listening to On the Radio with Tiffany and Kevin, the Dream Week edition. And we have had a great time here with our wonderful co-hosts, Reginald Ballard and Nakpodia.